Hey guys, I'm Katie,
And I'm Ryan.
and you're listening to The List, where we're watching IMDb's top 100 greatest movies of all time and telling you which ones are worth the watch. Always, it always takes me a minute with that. I'm like, am I going to say this right? So far, I haven't given it the African Queen treatment, but I always wonder if it's going to happen.
I think we're always debating whether we're going to say bucket list or
Or
chucket
Chuck
list.
It List. I did think
We should
about it
just
in
go for it.
passing as I was
I feel like we
speaking. We
should just go
should
for it.
take out, you suck it and suck it. Isn't that what Dave, uh, The Office,
David Wallace's
David
son.
Wallace made? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone back to the list. We have a Spotify comment this week from Demon Cat who says, I wonder what list y'all will do after the movies. Top 100 Disney Pixar movies, maybe? That's actually a very good suggestion. When Ryan and I started talking about doing this together, it was really just kind of something for us to be able to do together and chat about. And so we didn't want to isolate it down to just a podcast about one thing. We thought the 100 greatest movies of all time would be a really interesting thing to watch and talk about. But we wanted to be able to expand after that. And so I think actually after this, we're going to be considering other lists or other experiences. Um, so I don't think we'll do movies after this. I mean, we might. We still have a
We
lot of
might.
movies
I won't
left.
say we'll rule it out, but
Yeah.
I will say we have a lot of time still to think about this. We still
Yeah, a
have
lot.
about 80 weeks of movies to go through still.
Yeah,
And so we're keeping our options open. Still have several ideas kind of in the works.
we
But
do.
Pixar movies would actually be
So cute.
a pretty good one, and that would be tough because there's some really good Pixar movies.
Well, you know I don't like animated movies. I don't like to watch them.
Yeah, you'll be crying. You'll be crying like a baby through every single one.
Yeah, it's why I don't watch them. I feel like they're emotionally manipulative. I do enough crying in real life. I don't need to cry. I mean, like, I see
but
a
we'll
cat walk down the street and he's limping a little bit and I'm sobbing in the car. I don't need a Pixar movie to make me cry.
well, I won't say we will rule it out, but I'll say we'll keep it in mind. We're keeping options open, and I think as we get closer to that time, we're going to solidify some ideas. But um, that's not a bad one.
No, it's not. And we always love comments. We've had really nice comments so far from people we know, which is awesome. I love it when people we know comment on the podcast. But this is our first comment from just like a listener. So, hi. Thank you for commenting. And anyone who has any ideas of what they'd like to hear next, or if you have any questions at all about us or the podcast, please feel free to leave that in the Q&A section on Spotify or on our Instagram, which is Ryan and Kat's List, because I love to talk. So
Or just really fun bucket list things that you've done in the past that you
yeah,
think are worth
right.
doing. I'm down.
Yeah.
So that's what this is
Well,
all
to
about,
an
to try
extent.
it out and to see whether it's worth doing. And uh, I'd be excited to hear anybody else's list that they've done in the past.
I agree. Yeah. Um, I would be down with bucket list experiences to an extent, but there are plenty that you might do that I could watch and then you could tell me about. Speaking of, this week we had our first time of something. This was the first time we watched the movie separately for a couple of reasons, but mainly because, just for anyone listening who is watching the movies along with us, this movie had kind of a trigger warning with it in the synopsis that it's about um, just mental health struggles and suicide, which is something I find very difficult to, that kind of media is difficult for me to consume. And so Ryan watched it first this time, just enough to be able to tell me,
That
hey,
and the
this is,
fact that I had COVID, so I was
yeah,
staying
I
away
didn't
from
know if you wanted
everybody.
me to mention that.
So it's a
He did have,
little
was
combination.
very sick, but um, yeah, so if anybody is listening and wondering, if you have the same problem that I do with consuming that type of media, especially if, just at different points in your life, whatever. It's not there. You don't need to worry. It's not really a focal point of the movie. And while I will say the ending was a little rough, I don't think there's any reason not to watch the movie. If you're put off by the synopsis, don't be, would be my recommendation. So we'll jump in. Oh, sorry. Did you have something to say?
I was going to say, have you even said what the movie is?
The movie is called Network. I have called it The Network a million times. I've Googled it a couple of times and typed in The Network every time, but there's no the. It's just called Network, and it's from 1976.
76.
1976, and it's about a television network cynically exploiting a deranged former anchor's ravings and revelations about the news media for its own profit, but finds that his message may be difficult to control. This was a crazy movie. This is a really crazy movie, and if you look at the synopsis on whatever streaming platform you're using, it'll probably start off by saying that a news anchor whose ratings are falling tells everyone he's going to commit suicide on air. And you would think that the response to this would be, let's get him some help and get him off the air. But instead, the network is like, how do we get more ratings out of
How do we
this?
exploit this to get more ratings?
Yeah. And that's what they
and
do.
more
That's what the
money for
movie
our
is about.
shareholders.
Yeah. So it's basically a movie about, let me get the names right. Sorry. I can't remember people's names in real life, much less in movies. So this movie stars Faye Dunaway, William Holden, and Peter Finch. Peter Finch is played by Howard Beale, or Peter Finch plays Howard Beale, who is the man who's struggling and threatens to commit suicide. Faye Dunaway plays Diana Christensen, who's this really driven executive who wants to basically save the dwindling network by exploiting Howard Beale as much as she possibly can. And then William Holden plays Max Shoemaker, who is her very much older love interest and who also is Howard Beale's best friend. And he's kind of like, what are you doing? This
and
is
he's
not
also
great.
in charge of the news network for this, the news programming segment for this network. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What an interesting movie. It kind of shook me.
This movie scared the living crap out of me.
Why?
It is from 76, and it's like exactly what's going on in the world today. I feel like it shook my view of the media. Not that I needed much shaking to do, but I think it puts into perspective perfectly what the media is doing to exploit its consumers, especially the news portion. They go into this whole spiel about how they don't really care about the truth or what's out there. They're just trying to get ratings and get money for their shareholders. And so they'll do anything and say anything, including exploit this mentally deranged newscaster to bump up their ratings. And they do. And it's really, really scary. That and just some other scenes that we'll talk about, but it's almost, I don't know, this movie's like almost prophetic in a way that it is so applicable today that it scared me. It creeped me out.
It was really interesting to watch it and to consider the days of like Walter Cronkite, where a news anchor would get on air and would say facts. That was what he did. You knew when Walter Cronkite got on the air and said something that you were receiving unbiased information. And there has been a very interesting development from those days to the 24-hour news cycle to basically exactly, well, it just is a very, it's the product of capitalism, I guess. I think that most businesses and platforms, and I think everything is profit driven, and it's just become more so over the years, and the news is not exempt from that. And so it was very interesting to have this behind the scenes, very frank discussion of, we're going to exploit this however we can, and we're going to make money off of this however we can. It doesn't matter who it affects. It doesn't matter what the domino effect is here. The bottom line is, how are we going to make money? And we're going to do whatever we have to get that money in our pockets and to help our ratings. So,
And to use all our viewers to shape opinions and whatever else they wanted to do. It's pretty
yeah.
crazy.
I probably should have said this stuff before we got into the discussion of the movie, but I did want to say that Faye Dunaway was almost fired. This movie has extraordinary dialogue. This is, like we've talked about it in the past, some movies are driven by camera work, some movies are cinematography, some movies are about the personal journey that people go through, but this movie was very dialogue, like expert level dialogue, and there was a lot of heavy meaty monologues in this movie, and I guess Faye Dunaway struggled with them to the point where they told the director, if it keeps happening, you have our permission to let her go and hire somebody else. So she had a lot of trouble with it. Yeah.
Wow. That's surprising.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of long dialogues.
It was very dialogue heavy, and it's not even that there were a lot of monologues. It's that the monologues were very intense and emotional, and I can see where you would struggle with that. And she specifically was a very interesting character, which we'll get into. But
yeah, definitely. And I think for this type of script, there's not a lot of room for improvisation. So they probably wanted it to be exactly how they had written it, because what they wrote had meaning and layers behind it.
Yes.
And so that is probably very difficult, especially when you have a long monologue, to get it exactly right.
Yeah, and I've read that the director, I don't know how to say his name. It's Sidney Lumet, I think, but it's spelled Lumet. So I've never heard it pronounced, so I'm not sure. I've read that he had like the most control. Normally, there's a lot of outside perspective brought in on a movie once producers start coming in and once people start giving you money for the movie. But I guess he had like pretty much full creative control, and told Faye Dunaway when she was trying to learn about her character, what weaknesses does my character have? And he was like, none. And don't try to give her a weakness, because if you do, I'm cutting it out. She's very strong. She's very driven. And that's what I want you to portray. I don't want you to portray any weaknesses of hers. I don't want you to give her something that I haven't given you. So do what I've given you for the character. So I do see how it would be difficult. And also Peter Finch, who played Howard Beale, he had those really intense, he basically descended into madness throughout the movie, and a lot of his monologues also were very intense. And I guess after the movie ended, before the movie aired, he died of a heart attack in the director's arms. They were I can't remember if they were on like a circuit trying to promote the movie, but it was something related to the movie, and he had a heart attack and he died in the director's arms. Someone tried to give him mouth to mouth, and
this was during the filming, or this was...
The filming was done, but the movie wasn't out. So it's somewhere between filming wrapping and the movie releasing. He actually was the first person to receive a posthumous Oscar. He actually died. He was only 60 years old. And before he took the role in this movie, he was going to retire to Jamaica. He was done, and he was going to go live out his life in Jamaica in retirement. But he got cast in the movie and decided that he had to do it. Speaking of Oscar facts, Beatrice Straight, who played Max's wife, the one he was cheating on, she was only on screen for 6 minutes. And she was the first person. She won the Oscar for those 6 minutes. She won an Oscar. and it was like the shortest performance to ever receive an Oscar.
Wow.
Yeah. So another
She is
interesting
great
fact.
in those 6 minutes.
She
I
was
mean, she's
great,
fantastic.
but another interesting fact about just those 6 minutes, I guess she couldn't say the word emeritus,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to dub over it in post. I guess
Post
that's what it's
production.
called. Yeah, they had to dub over it. She genuinely could not get it right.
That's funny.
Emeritus. She kept saying emeritus, and they were like
Emeritus.
emeritus. She just couldn't get it, and then she went on to win an Oscar. And Gene Hackman, that's the guy from Willy Wonka, right?
No.
Gene.
Gene
Who's Gene?
Wilder is the one from Willy
Who's
Wonka.
Gene
Gene
Hackman?
Hackman is another actor. Hoosiers. He's in a lot of movies. He's not in this movie though.
Well, Gene Hackman. I wrote down Gene Hackman really wanted a role, really wanted to be in this movie, but he wasn't cast. But maybe it was Gene. I don't know. There's a guy named Gene, which I feel like doesn't happen.
Gene
much
wanted
anymore.
to be in this movie.
I feel like that doesn't happen much anymore.
Blue Gene.
Men being named Gene.
No, not a whole lot anymore.
I feel like it's developed into a woman's name. And don't ask me why this made me think of this. But did you know Margot Robbie? First off, that she's Australian. And secondly, that she got her start in acting by calling a TV show, an Australian TV show, every day. Like she called like hundreds of times asking to be in the show, and they eventually said yes.
They said to stop bothering us. We'll let you in.
That's how she got her start in acting, which I think is
That's funny. I have no idea why you drew those two relations in your head.
I don't either. Because he wanted to be in the movie, I guess, and she wanted to be on the TV show.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I think that's all my fun facts for this movie. And what a fun movie it was. That's how I'd describe this movie. Fun.
It was fun. I thought it really was fun.
No.
In a creepy, scary way, but fun. It takes you for a ride, that's for sure.
I did.
There's a lot of cool symbolism in this movie.
There is. I agree. Why don't we get that started under story? Go for it.
First of all, I don't know if you noticed what the symbol for the network was. UBS.
BS?
Yeah.
No, I didn't notice
your
that.
BS, basically. Which I thought was
their
very
BS.
appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that was on purpose or that's just me drawing a conclusion, but I thought that was pretty clever.
Did you notice the lighting? Oh, I'll save that for cinematography. Never mind. Go ahead.
The lighting.
I'll just drop that tantalizing comment and then talk about it.
I'm intrigued now. You have to go. You have to jump into it now.
I was just going to say, maybe it was just me, but did you notice how the lighting went from very normal to as they started making his character more and more contrived, it turned into commercial lighting. Like as it went further and further, it went from normal, natural, lifelike to stage to commercial, to fake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just thought the lighting was interesting, and I will plop that down in cinematography. But
no, yeah. I did notice that, and I think that's I think cinematography is one of the really strong parts of this movie because the director had an amazing vision.
Chills.
Visually, this movie is frightening to behold, just because of some of the imaging. The whole. I'm skipping over to the cinematography as well, just because
let's go.
I want to talk about this.
Let's do it.
The whole, just some of the close-ups of the Howard's character, the newscaster, just those close-ups where he just looks like a complete madman.
Yeah.
Where he's he is screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'm mad as hell." Right? And I'm
not going to take it anymore.
And I'm not going to take it anymore, right? And he's like, "Go to your windows and scream this." And then they have this scene where people are all over the country. They're calling in saying people are yelling this, and then they open the windows and there's just people all around in the city yelling
Screaming.
this.
And Max is at home. He's been fired and he's at home, and his daughter opens up the window and they peek their heads out, and people are on their balconies, not screaming in a fun way. They're not screaming, I'm mad as hell. They're like, I'm mad as hell. And it's just terrifying to watch someone have that kind of power. And you're going, this is a madman. This man needs help. He needs to be institutionalized. He doesn't need to be on television telling people what to do with their lives. But the viewers don't know that. They view him as some kind of prophet, and they're going to take whatever he says to heart and go outside and do it. And it's kind of horrifying to know that someone can have that kind of power,
Yeah,
and
and
we don't
that's their
know.
the whole network's thing is to drive rage and anger, and by that and controversy, and that's one of the ways that they drive their ratings up. And so that's pretty scary. That influence that one character has. Like you said, he's a prophet. They start calling him the prophet of news or something like that. And there's even this crazy scene where as the uh, the main character or the main female character takes over the network and sensationalizes it even more, where he appears before this like stained glass window, like he's preaching in a church.
Yeah.
Like the news has become the new religion of America.
And he's
And
completely
whatever
changed
he
his
says
cadence.
is, he does. It's like a sermon.
It is a pastor, it is a fire and brimstone pastor, South Georgia Baptist preacher delivering a sermon, is how he's speaking. And he's not like that in the beginning. In the beginning, he says, I'm Howard Beale, and this is your 11 o'clock news. And then he turns into this, where he's telling you the world's going to end, and you better do something about it. And it's horrific.
Yep. It's scary. Just that whole imagery right there to watch that whole thing. And then there's another scene towards the end when his message kind of gets out of control, and he talks against the network and ends up losing them money. And he gets called into the CEO of this company, and he's like, let's go to the conference room. And that whole scene where they're looking down this long conference table with the lights, and he is like this.
Child.
Yeah, Howard becomes this little tiny insignificant child, and the
Looking
CEO
up.
of this company is this massive godlike figure, and he lets him have it. He's like, you have messed with the primal forces of nature, money, basically. And he rips into him and just breaks him. And that is a scary, frightening scene and monologue as well to me.
What's so
And,
interesting about that scene, I think, is that they everyone knows by now, everyone involved knows by now that Howard is very, very mentally ill. Very. No one is under any other belief. They know that he is mentally ill. And even the CEO has heard him say something on his show that he knows he can use against him. So he calls him into that room and he sits him down at the end of what he knows will be hypnotizing and affect him very strongly, and then uses words that he knows Howard has talked about dreaming. Howard has this dream, right?
mm-hmm.
And talks about it. And so then the CEO uses his delusions to manipulate him into manipulating the viewers. So everyone involved knows what they're doing and they know how wrong it is, but all they care about is the bottom line, the money.
Yeah, and that's what that CEO does with that company. He breaks Howard Stern's message, which is out of
Howard
control.
Stern.
He just Howard Stern. Wow, wrong person.
This
Wrong
is Gene.
Howard.
You can't make fun of me for Gene Wilder now.
That's true. I apologize. You got me. Touche. But they take Howard's message, which he had free reign over, and he tells him, "You're no longer allowed to do this. You're going to preach what I tell you from now on," basically. And then
But
from then
he does
their
it in
ratings
such
just start dropping and dropping and dropping because of that. And I won't spoil anything, but uh, things happen because of that.
yeah.
And it's really just the whole setup, the whole imagery, and all the dialogue and the monologues that go along to set this whole thing up is really creepy. And the other thing I really like is the relationship between Diana and Max. Max represents this old way of the television and the news and the truth finding. And then you have Diana, who represents this new, sensational, profit driven, she is television media incarnate. And even in the scene where he's telling his wife about the affair that he's having, she asks him, like, do you love her? And he, if you notice, he never says he loves her. He's just infatuated with her. The same way that we're all infatuated with the television or the news in this scenario. You hate it, but for some reason you're
Caught
locked
up in it.
in and obsessed with it, and can't think of anything else. And then it's just a cool symbol on how their relationship actually just reflects the whole situation of the movie that's going on. And so I thought that was a nice little touch as well.
Yeah. So
So what
story wise, go ahead.
Yeah,
What were you
story
going to
wise.
say?
So story wise, I think this is an excellent story. Not only, surface level, a crazy lunatic madman newscaster and a corrupt corporation, but the underlying, theme I think is really interesting plot. It's way up there for me. It's a 9.7.
I'd give the story a 9. It was great. The initial hook of a news anchor sitting down and saying, I have nothing to live for. My ratings are dropping. So on Thursday, I'm gonna hurt myself on TV, be here, and let's see if we can get those ratings up. Like that's a hook. And then you think you know what's coming next, that they're going to
And
get him
you have
help and they're
no
going to yank him
idea.
off the air, and then they just turn everything on its head with the company saying, let's milk this for all we can and make him our man and get those ratings back up. And you're
And I
watching
thought
it
the
horrified, but you can't stop watching it.
Yeah, I thought the pacing of this and the way they were going back and forth through different story plots was phenomenal. I was interested the entire time and horrified at the same time.
I agree. Pacing is a hard thing to get right in any media that people consume.
Mm-hmm.
So for it to, but it was done very well. I agree. So definitely a 9 for me, maybe higher, but I'm going to stick with my 9. I think acting. I don't know who was best. Everyone was incredible. No one was a weak link. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was really good. Yeah, I
Howard
can't think.
Beale really could have been over the top, where you want to laugh at him, or where it's just unbelievable, but it was not. It was not unbelievable, and you did not want to laugh. You were scared and sad for him, and you just wanted to reach through the screen and get him help. Just thinking, why is nobody helping this man? And
And even Diana and Max were really great
they were
actors.
great.
Their relationships very complex. I find it really interesting that you said the director told her not to have any weaknesses. Like,
She had weaknesses.
she definitely,
She did
but
not have off. He did not want her injecting off-screen weaknesses into her character. Like, a lot of times people will make up a character backstory before they start acting. And he
Mm-hmm.
didn't want her to be like, I don't know, to put anything into the character that he had not given her, like no secret ingredients in the chili recipe, right? Like, this is the chili we want. Here are the ingredients. Make it. And yeah, she definitely had weaknesses. Like, she was obsessed. She couldn't
She's
let
definitely a
go.
flawed
She was
character, but
laser focused.
she's television.
Yeah.
She's like, even her character, like incessant talking and blabbering
There's a
all the
scene
time,
where there's a scene
all
where
the
they're
time. It never
having,
stopped. She always was
yeah.
thinking of a show, always thinking of revenue, always thinking of commercials, how to generate profits. Like, that was just her from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Like, it literally didn't stop even when she was making love with the
Yeah, that's what I was going to
with one of
say.
the characters.
They have a sex scene, and in the scene she just there is nary a second where she is not talking about TV.
Mm-hmm.
Blah 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 blah. It didn't stop.
So very
Yeah.
difficult roles
Yeah, I agree. And for them to
and
have
some
been portrayed
phenomenal
with
acting.
nuance and and never over the line, never outlandish. They were captured very well. The acting is superb. I would give the acting a higher score than the story. I think I'm going to give it a 9.5.
I'm right. I'm right with you. 9.5 for me. Also,
And
cinematography. We've talked about that. Was there
we
anything else
have,
that you wanted to add to the cinematography aspect?
well, just that it was brilliant. And there's especially a scene where Howard Beale is preaching and it like up, the camera goes up and over and onto him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was insane. And also, just to talk about how far they went to capitalize on him, he would give these speeches to the point where he would seize. I don't know what was happening to him, but he would fall onto the floor. And there was never anybody who ran out and was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" All that happened was the camera would get closer and zoom in on him so that the world could see. This poor man.
I think it was just a play on him gonna die on camera, and so every episode he would die on camera, and you just tuned in to see whether he would really die on camera or not.
I didn't get that. To me, it just seemed like more exploitation of him, that he was pushing himself to literally passing out. I mean, can you imagine being at your lowest mentally and having a mental break? You're in anguish. And instead of the people around you coming together to help you and to support you and to get you through it, they think, how can we use this to our advantage to make money with literally zero care in the world about your well-being? It's a horrible thing to see, and that has nothing to do with cinematography. I'm just thinking about him passing out and the camera just zooming over to him and how horrible that is. But
I see. I
uh,
didn't get the feeling that he actually passed
you
out, because
think
I
it was
thought
just part of the act?
he was moving and his eyes were open. I
Yeah,
thought,
that's what made me think he had a seizure, because there were some times where he
and he
was
wasn't seizing. So
moving
I
weird.
didn't think he
But
was. I didn't get that vibe, but maybe
yeah,
I'll
that
have to
just,
go
I
back
think
and
it just
watch.
maybe because the concentration for me in this movie, what stuck with me the most was the way he was being taken advantage of in a vulnerable time. And so that's what I picked up from that. It just is, to me,
It's
it
another way to
shows,
drive up ratings for me.
yeah, but really was, yeah, I guess in the beginning he wanted to drive up ratings, but I felt like he
Well, that's
eventually
why he
really
was getting
believed what he
fired in
was
the first
talking
place,
about. Yeah.
because
Do
his
you think
ratings
he
weren't good.
believed the stuff he was saying? Or do you think the entire time he was also trying to drive ratings? Because I didn't. I thought he
I
believed what he was
think
saying.
he may not have believed it to begin with, but eventually he did.
Yeah. It's
Like,
crazy, this
he
stuff your
convinced
mind can
himself.
trick you into believing. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Um,
Whether he was acting to become a character, he became that character.
yeah. There was no separation in the end. In the end, he was wholly consumed by what was going on camera.
So
Um,
cinematography for me is a 10, hands down.
Tell me why you give it a 10.
Just the visual component and how it drove the story and the creepiness and just the overall theme of the whole movie, or to me, was incredible.
What I'm struggling with here, point wise, is that to me, the acting and the story were both more impressive than the cinematography to me. But there was nothing lacking, really. It's not like anything was wrong with the cinematography. So I think I'm going to give it a 9 as well, in line with the story. And then the acting was just above both of those to me. And then what was the wow factor to you in this movie?
The creep factor, the creep factor, just how absolutely horrifying and applicable the whole movie is, even 50 years later, 60 years later. It's a 10 for me as well on that.
This whole movie to me is a wow, which is a cop out to say. So I'm trying to think of a specific wow factor for me.
It's a combination of all of them. It really is. It's the acting, it's the dialogue, it's the use of color, the cinematography elements with
Okay, so I think I'm going to
camera
steal what you're
angles.
saying because I actually thought that earlier. I thought, how do we, discuss this movie in pieces when it's so intertwined with all of those things? Like the story relies on the acting, relies on the cinematography. So I think I'm actually going to say the wow factor for this movie is how well each of those aspects were executed in this movie and how well they all meshed together, how each one was done so nicely and tied in so well together. So
And that's the difference between some of the movies that we just thought were good movies
good.
and then
Yeah.
great movies. For me,
Right.
this is a phenomenal movie
Yeah.
because all of those elements are in perfect harmony with each other.
I
And
agree.
that's what makes this movie
Harmony,
so
that's the
good.
perfect word. I think a lot of movies do one thing really well, and
Hmm.
you remember that. You just think, wow, they did that so well. And this movie just did a
But when
lot
they
of
do all
things.
of them so good like that,
Yeah.
it is magical. And that's
It's
what
like a
this movie does.
it's like um an orchestra where you don't leave saying the flutes were really great tonight. You leave saying that was a great piece performed by the orchestra. And I think it was just very well timed and very well pieced together and very well performed. Um,
So, what would you score it?
I'm going to give the wow factor a 9. Do you think this is a top 100 movie?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I do too.
Definitely.
Do you think? Go ahead.
And it is a bucket list movie for me.
Yeah. I agree. It's a bucket list movie for me too. It's a little, I think it's more fun when we don't agree. And so we have agreed on almost every movie. The past 5 movies, we've had the same answer to those questions. But there's no doubt that this is a bucket list movie.
This is a
Do
bucket
I
list
think
movie.
everybody's going to enjoy this movie? No, I don't. I don't think it's for young children.
No,
Um,
there's some language, there's some other
yeah.
mature themes in it. And
And do I think it
like
just
I
may
said,
not be?
it's a complicated, complex topic that they're tackling.
It's not
And
a
so
date night movie.
no, it's not like it's not like a super fun movie,
Yeah.
but it's thought
Interesting.
provoking, it's
Hmm.
interesting, it's in a way a horror movie
Yeah. There have been a couple of movies on our lists
because it
that
shines. I think what it does is puts a mirror up to society, and you look at it and go, "Whoa, this is this is scary real life almost."
and I think it also makes you go, what have I been manipulated by? Because, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product.
Hmm.
All of these things that we consume for free, everything in life now has is moving towards making money. If you are not the one paying for it, then money is being made one way or the other. and it's probably at your expense. And so it makes you wonder, what have I consumed and it's been manipulated on the way to me, and what reason has it been manipulated? And
This is a
scary
bit
thought.
of a spoiler. There's a scene towards the end with Diane and Max where he basically knows that there's no future for them. And he says something to the lines of he needs to separate from her to go back to reality and enjoy real life instead of staying in this TV fantasy world and missing out on his real life.
Yeah.
And there's even a part where Howard's like, turn off your TVs right now, go outside and don't turn them back on. You're all being manipulated, basically. And, after watching this movie, I was kind of like, I don't need to watch any more of these top 100 films of all time. I just need to go turn off the TV,
Live real life.
and go live real life and have something tangible, something real, instead of this weird fantasy world that we're all obsessed with. And that's the mirror that this film flips on you, and makes you think about it. And it's really good.
I think a
So I
lot
think
of
it's a bucket
movies
list for that reason and many others.
I think a lot of movies have characters who change. That's the point. When you read craft books about writing, every single craft book is going to talk you through a character arc. And the character arc is going to be that they change, or that they learn something but don't change. Something happens to the person to make them different than when they started. So it's very interesting to watch a movie that does not do that, especially with
Diane's character does
Diane.
not change.
She
Well,
stays static through the entire movie
and
and does
usually
not
those are
change.
tragedies.
Yeah. Well,
And this is a tragedy in a lot of ways. Max's
I think we're
character does
tiptoeing the
have
spoiler
a little bit of
line.
change, but
Yeah, he does, but does he? I don't know.
not a lot. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of change, right? It's just going
Yeah.
back to what I was before, and I lost
Yeah.
that. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting. It's an interesting movie. I liked it a lot.
Would you like to do your rank list?
Oh yeah, let's do that real quick. So this is gonna hop way up for me. I think I'm actually gonna put it into the number 2 slot. That's how
What?
high I'm putting it.
Above Wuthering Heights?
I am.
Above James Dean?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and for me, it was just a really enjoyable film on a lot of levels.
Wow.
Like I said, it's not necessarily a fun date night movie, but it's interesting. It's thought provoking, and I really liked it.
I'm actually really shocked by that. Okay. I don't know what I'm going to do. I do know The Graduate's going to get knocked off my list. And I do know it's better than these three for me.
Mm-hmm.
And better than Pulp Fiction. And I think it's even going to go above Rebel Without a Cause, but that's where it's stopping for me. I'm going to put it at number 5. I think Wuthering Heights, Third Man, Double Indemnity, and Good Will Hunting are all better movies. But this is the first movie in 2 weeks that you've put on the list.
Yeah, it's been a little while, so I've been holding it, and I'm really glad to finally have one to do.
Yeah.
Because the other ones have just been good, but not like bucket list worthy, and
Yeah.
this one I feel like is.
I did just want to say one spoilery thing. So if anybody's listening who does not want to be spoiled for this movie,
Spoiler.
make sure to follow us on
Danger.
Ryan and Kat's list before you go. And I promise I'll start posting on Instagram again. So I did want to say
she's gotten really good at Photoshop, so you should really
actually
check out those.
I did just want to say that I found it interesting that they would use him to the degree that when he was no longer beneficial for them, there wasn't even fire him. They just killed him.
Well, the CEO said you cannot fire him because he was preaching the message that he wanted him to preach, right? And they were like, our ratings are tanking.
Yeah.
And so they killed him to get those rankings back up.
I mean,
and that's one of the things where I was like, he drops dead on the stage every night. And so finally, in the end, they make him drop dead.
Yeah, and you
on the
saw
stage.
it as foreshadowing.
They assassinate him.
Yeah.
And that's just another one of those horrific things that they killed this guy for ratings.
Yeah.
Just to get more views and money. They killed this man.
Literally whatever it takes.
They used him and then killed him.
Yeah.
Scary stuff.
It is.
Haunting.
Well, thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Ryan and Kat's List. That's not what our podcast is called. It's called The List. So thank you guys for joining us on that. Next week, we are going to be watching another movie.
What is that movie? I don't know. I haven't looked lately. Let's look.
So next week, we're watching Nashville, which is a comedy, drama, music.
Nashville.
It just says music, but I couldn't.
I have never seen Nashville.
It is from 1975, so a year earlier than the one we watched this week, with 1 Oscar and 5 Oscar nominations.
Okay.
The network had 10 Oscar nominations and got 4.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I don't know what film it was up against that year, but I can definitely see that it was nominated a lot for a lot of categories.
So make sure to join us next week for
Nashville.
I forgot. Can't wait to see you guys then. Bye.
Laters.
This is our closing music.